4.8% growth is actually a quite good number in the context of a new normal here.
There is a lot of service-based growth that's happening.
The property market is still not supporting the growth of the overall consumption by a very large extent.
Just by lifting these things will unlock a huge demand.
The leading Chinese companies in the pet economy in China, their return on their asset is marvelous, 15-20%, sometimes even more than 20%.
It reflects a genuine change in how Chinese consumers have started to define value.
The Chat Lounge. Chat Lounge.
Chat Lounge.
The Chat Lounge unpacks views and opinions on hot issues in a more casual way.
Welcome to the Chat Lounge. I'm Tuyu, and joining me for a chat on China's consumption rebound are Subramania, Bhatt, founder and CEO of the Singapore-based marketing technology company China Trading Desk, Gong, professor of economics, University of International Business and Economics in Beijing, and Chen, Jiahe, chief investment officer of the Beijing-based Novem Arcae Technologies. It's a great pleasure to have you all back for the chat, gentlemen. So China's consumer spending showed a noticeable rebound in the first 2 months of the year. But before we dive into the numbers, let me start with our two Chinese guests here. A quick question. What's the latest thing you've bought, or what's currently on your shopping list? Shall we begin with John?
Okay, well, I have contributed my fair share of China's consumption lately. Manifesting efforts to renovate my new condo, actually.
Right.
We had a new place that we are just about to start in 3 days, actually, on 29th, 4 days. And this is going to be, a big chunk of money to refurbish the apartment. I'm thinking about, I have a budget for 20,000 yuan, so it's actually a quite significant number.
Right.
It's a 3-bedroom apartment. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
almost 3,000 US dollars.
no, more than that. It's actually 30,000 US dollars, right?
You were saying 200,000 yuan, not 20,000.
Yeah, it's a renovation of a new apartment. It's a
Right,
brand new
okay.
apartment.
Yeah, that would cost a lot. A great contributor. I think I can call you. And what about Jiahe?
Well, I would say, first of all, it's a lot of clothes. The
Yeah,
weather
right.
is turning, so you just buy a lot of clothes. And second, toys for the kid. The kid is turning into her age of 2 to 3, so it's so many toys you keep on buying. And final thing is that it's not something that I buy, but the hotels are booked because I've been traveling recently. So it's quite a lot of hotels you keep on booking. Yeah, it's a lot
Right.
of consumption.
I think my most recent purchase, coincidentally, it's also about traveling. And that was a 5-day cruise along the Three Gorges. So we'll see whether you represent any aspect of the new trends later on. But now let's take a look at the general picture. China's retail sales have beaten expectations, rising 2.8% in the first 2 months. The pace was almost 2 points faster than the growth recorded last December. So, Subu, from your observation, how significant is this rebound?
Yeah, I think from my side, I would say this as more as a stabilization rebound, not a big boom, right? The number matters because it's showing improvement, and it suggests that the consumer demand is no longer deteriorating, right? But it is just too early to call it a broad-based comeback. And we are seeing the same thing when we do our quarterly travel sentiment survey. We run like one of the largest surveys in China. And what we see is that, there's a big market demand that exists, but consumers are becoming more deliberate, more selective, much harder to convert, right? So we find that, demand has settled, but conversion has not. So the challenge is no longer generating appetite. It's more about giving consumers enough value, clarity, trust, and justification to make that commitment.
Right. Like you said, it's kind of modest. And of course, some media reports say it remained the weakest start to any year. on record since 2000, excluding the pandemic slump. And the figure was notably lower than the 4% growth recorded during the same period last year. So, Subu, what's your interpretation of that?
Yeah, I mean, that is true. But it's also very selective, I would say, right? Because it is not uniform across all the sectors. What we are seeing is that the service sector is picking up a lot more than the traditional retail sector. And we are seeing that there is quite a bit of interest in a lot of other areas that making up for the consumption rather than the traditional areas of big ticket items, more experiential, more emotional values that go into purchases across these different sectors.
All right. Then to John, how desirable is this one? Would you focus on it's a rebound, especially when compared with the later stage of last year? Or would you focus on it remains the weakest start to any year?
Well, I think 2.8% growth is actually a quite good number in the context of the new normal here about China's economic growth. We are no longer in a sort of a high growth era now. China's economy is becoming more like a developed economy. So, 3%, 4% is considered very high growth. So, 2.8% is fairly a decent number. I would give it a little bit more months to make a decision as to whether this represents a sort of a trend or it's just an on-off thing. I'm actually quite a little bit reserved about the prospect of a strong uptick trend.
Right.
I think if you look at the economy, there are still points of weakness, and I would give it more time to see whether this represents a more of a long-term trend. I think one thing probably on the more optimistic side is the low prices. I think consumers are starting to realize that these prices are too good to be true here in China. I've been traveling quite extensively in the last few years. And everywhere you go, you go to Europe, you go to North America, you see these prices going up very, very noticeably. And you think about the price level here in China, it's really competitive. It's really a bargain in my view. And I think more and more consumers starting to realize that this is a very good time for low prices, but it's not going to last forever. I think prices here in China are going to catch up with the rest of the world. So if that's the case, people have a more urgency to go out and buy things. I think purchasing power is still there. If you look at the aggregate savings at the banks, look at the banks' deposit level, it's at an all-time high, and also the stock market is doing quite well, in the last few months. There's a wealth effect here. So I think people have the purchasing power. It's a matter of whether they're willing to spend the money or not. Now, when people realize that the good prices are not going to last forever, they probably go out and buy things. I'm thinking it that way. I think that I'm going to spend a whole bunch of money to refurbish my apartment, and I think that if I wait for too long, things are going to rise. Prices are going to rise.
Then what are the key drivers behind this, early pickup in consumer spending? So we just mentioned the service sector has experienced some big growth.
Well, in January and February, the stock market has been doing quite well, right?
Right.
That might be the reason. That's something I can think of, and I don't have other reasons off the top of my head. But I think I would give it more months to see whether we're going to continue this momentum or this just a on-off thing.
Okay. Jiahe, what's your observation then?
Well, we can see the overall consumption has been growing pretty stable, in the first 2 months of the year. If we look at many subsectors, for example, traveling, film industry, these kinds of things, they have got pretty rapid growth. One of the reasons why the overall consumption growth is not very rapid is because the property market is still not supporting the growth of the overall consumption by a very large extent. And if you exclude the impact from the property market, you can see the rest sectors of the consumption economy have been growing at a more rapid speed. And if you just look at, how much people have been consuming online, how much people have been traveling, I mean, these kind of things are usually not that much connected with the property market, then you can observe a slightly faster growth of the consumption in these sectors compared with the overall consumption market. And also the policies from the government has been strongly stimulating the consumption. For example, a lot of subsidies has been given if you purchase large home appliances items such as air conditioner, TV sets, fridges, these kinds of things. Also, the interest rate that is now charged by financial institutions to consumption loans, they are really low. I mean, I'm personally having quite a large amount of loan quota from the banks. They're offering me the rate of 3% only. So that's a very, very low interest rate. I mean, think about how much rate you get in United States if you borrow money from the bank. I mean, the benchmark rate is like 3 to 4%. And if you go to borrow money from financial institutions, you talk about 6 or 7% because there is a premium that will be charged by the financial institutions on top of the benchmark interest rates offered by the Fed. So China is that if you go to a bank as a consumer like me, I don't have any collateral paid for the banks. Only for my personal credit, I can borrow a large chunk of money at only 3% per year.
That's not for a lot of people. It's just for a few people like you, right?
No, it's actually quite a lot of people. I mean, as long as you get a regular job in China and you pay regular social insurance, you don't have much previous default records, then you can get a pretty large amount of money from your banks. I would say that usually people get like 500,000 or 250,000 yuan only by your credit. You don't need to pay any collateral. And the interest rate is as low as 3%. I heard some are offering 2.9%. So it's really low rate. And this rate is helping to stimulate the consumption. Then many people are saying, okay, as long as you can borrow from the banks at such a low rate, why don't I borrow something?
All right. Then Subu, from your perspective, is it driven more by pent-up demand or policy support like subsidies or like a lower interest rate like Jiahe just mentioned?
Yeah, I would say that pretty much all the ones that I mentioned earlier play a very big role. But I do see that there are a couple of other points that we have not yet touched because it's the first 2 months. I do see that Spring Festival itself was a strong effect. Right, this year we saw almost close to 600 million domestic trips and almost over 800 billion yuan being spent in domestic travel. And for this year, our projection for international outbound travel by the Chinese is estimated to be about 280 billion US dollars. Right, so that's the highest it's going to be so far. And last year, based on safe BOP, balance of payment, we saw it's almost 250 million, 254 billion, I think, to be right, US dollars. So there is a substantial growth that we're estimating in terms of just the tourism sector outbound of China. So the Spring Festival itself made a big contribution to the first 2 months because it was included in Feb. And like I mentioned to you, service performing goods, right? The service retail sales itself, I think, grows about 5.6%. But things like this was faster than total retail. Catering, food grows almost close to 5%. So there is a lot of service-based growth that's happening. The other one that we see is also things like online retail stores, especially categories around self-reward, social occasions, gifting, and emotional economy. All right, so these are something that we've also highlighted in our reports. These will be some of the new growth categories that we see for this year.
Right, like you said, beyond the headline rebound, there are some structural shifts in Chinese economy today. Then, John, what's your interpretation of that? What are the most important ones?
I think the most frequently mentioned weaknesses of China's economy, namely the local government debt, the real estate markets, are getting improved, I think. I think, there is clear indications that the real estate market decline is about to bottom out. That, it's close to reach the bottom if it's already bottomed out. And in some cities, like I've read in Shanghai, for example, the prices actually are going up. This is the first time to see real estate price going up in quite a few years, right? I mean, it's only a few cities, by the way. Doesn't mean that everywhere is going up, but this is a very good signs. I think it represents the earliest stage of a recovery in the real estate market. So,
Where are those
and
cities?
the
Like what I know is that only in Shanghai.
well, I mean, this is the general rule of the real estate market. Usually, the best locations see the last drop and they recover the first time. That's generally the rule. So the market recovers firstly at the best locations. So it's not surprising to see that the inner cities of Shanghai and Beijing are starting to see recoveries first.
All right.
So I think, this is a sort of a very good sign. And also I want to just a few things about the local government debt. I think, this used to be a notorious problem, right? And it has huge implications for the local economy. The government's not paying its bills, it percolates down, and you get a chain of bills that are not being paid. So the central government is doing a lot to help with local governments, and I've heard that these bills are starting to be paid. So I think these are, if you ask me, the structural shifts. I think these are the two things that are very encouraging to see about China's economy right now.
Right. The property market is really a unique sector, and we've talked a lot about it in previous episodes. But this time, there are also a lot of other features that are very eye-catching, such as the tobacco and alcohol sector. We'll have more on that right after the break.
With a history of 5,000 years, it's no surprise that China has created a fabulous treasury of folk tales.
Once a year, on the 7th day of the 7th month, all the magpies fly up to heaven and form a bridge.
So many amazing worlds to discover.
I want a new palace,
said King Mu of Zhou one day.
Chinese folk tales retold for audiences today. Will you marry me?
He asked. And with little hesitation, she said, yes.
5,000 years of amazing Chinese folk tales.
My father must not go to war. Someone must take his place.
You'll find Chinese Folk Tales Season 3, wherever you discover your favorite podcasts.
Welcome back to the Chat Lounge. We continue our chat on the new trends in China's consumption rebound. Now, some new changes in the tobacco and alcohol sector. They have surged nearly 20%, well above last year's 5.5%. What's behind this spike? Subu mentioned the Spring Festival effect. Jiahe, what's your interpretation of that?
Well, this is a very interesting thing because usually we don't have that much changing with the tobacco and alcohol, because if you look at tobacco, people don't smoke much more just in a few months time compared with last year. The smoking is probably very similar. And if you look at alcohol, then in recent years we actually had a trend of dropping consumption for alcohol, especially the Chinese spirit. There has been a dropping of the consumption over there. A potential reason is that maybe the alcohol consumption has actually experienced a slight trough in last year's first 2 months. Then when you are making a comparison between this year's data with last year, you see a rapid growth, but this might only say that it's going back to normal. So this is a reason that I have been thinking about. But the trend of China's alcohol consumption is actually that the younger people are drinking less and less spirits, but they're drinking more things like wine, Chinese yellow wine, beer, these kind of alcohols that are much less strong. And because these alcohol actually are cheaper compared with the Chinese traditional spirit, then we actually seeing a dropping of the overall consumption for the alcohol. And if you look at tobacco, is that China has been doing quite a lot of efforts with containing the smoking, especially in public places. I mean, now if you're a smoker in China, you find it's very difficult for you to find a smoking place in many places, such as within shopping malls. You can't smoke in any shopping mall. You just can't smoke there. Restaurants, don't even talk about trains. It's really a difficult situation for tobacco smokers, which is a good thing for the health of the people. But if you look at the overall consumption of tobacco, it's actually in a trend that is not growing too much. So I'd say it's probably the reason because of some statistical disturbance that happened back in the comparison base of 2025.
All right. Subu, have you studied that? What's been supporting the spike then?
Yeah, in terms of if you talk about alcohol and tobacco, I think what Jiahe mentioned is probably quite accurate. But what we also see is that, like I mentioned to you earlier part, the Spring Festival is making a big dent in some of these consumptions growth, especially around gifting and family gathering and just general hospitality spending, right? Even if it is not hardcore alcohol that we are looking at, the auxiliary and derived alcohols like fruit flavored, tea-based alcohol. There are so many innovations that's happening right now in the alcohol industry that more younger generation are willing to try something not as harsh and as strong as Baidu, etc. Right?
Yeah,
so they are looking at more social way of drinking and experiencing alcohol. That this is probably one of the reasons why
this year's
there
figure,
is a big surge.
Right, but this year's figures is almost 4 times of that recorded last year. That's a bit unusual, right?
Yes, it is certainly unusual. So beyond that, I don't see a big reason to see why this is increasing so much. I probably will have to wait for a few more months to do a more deeper analysis. All our clients that we work with, especially in marketing side for alcohol, have seen pretty much depression, not just in China, but across the globe. Right. So the younger generation have been drinking less. All these big alcohol companies now have a lot of stock in hand, which means that they are either waiting for it to expire, some of the, especially the derived products expire and have to throw away, or they have to sell at a loss. So we are seeing quite a bit of pressure in the alcohol industry. But to see that it's increased so much is something that is more of an outlier than I would say directly contributed through any rational explanation yet for the first 2 months.
And then, John, do you have any explanation for this that can, surprise us?
I don't know whether this is sort of temporary or it's sort of a more of a trend. If you look at tobacco and alcohol, I my bet would be on the alcohol side. The tobacco, I think the total consumption has been steadily coming down. Why is alcohol? Maybe it's because of we have the New Year season. I mean, the Spring Festival season, people drink it a bit more. I don't know. It's actually, I don't have a very good idea about why that's the case, actually.
Right. Maybe we can find out after this.
Yeah, I do have an opinion about, the
sales
gold
of gold,
and
silver, and jewelry.
Yeah, this is actually very simple. It's all because of the gold price. Gold price is undergoing a strong uprise for the last few months. So I guess people probably view jewelry more as an investment vehicle as opposed to something just for decoration, I guess. I know people like that around me. I never believe in that, by the way. But obviously people, start to see the jewelry they bought in the past are appreciating because of the gold price. That may be the reason.
Okay, Jiahe, are you an ardent investor here? Gold, silver, jewelry?
You talk about Uh, well, we have seen a large correction of the gold price and silver price in recent months. So, well, I'm personally not in the investment of gold at this very moment because it has been rising so much. I mean, I'm a personally a value investor, and we talk about valuation quite a lot. And I'm more getting used to things of what we call bottom fishing rather than trend following, which means that I would more prefer to buy something when its price has been dropping for many months or even many years, and the valuation is very attractive, and nobody really wants this asset. And that's the way I make investment in the capital market. But if you look at gold, also silver, even copper, their prices have been rising quite a lot in the past many years. I mean, gold is probably in one of its largest bull markets in its history, ever since its price has been free floating since I think 1970s. So I'm not the kind of investor who will follow such a trend. I just not getting used to that.
Okay. Then there were also some fluctuations. Automobile sales saw a decline of over 7% and a new low for this period over the past 5 years. So, Subu, what happened?
Yeah, so I think this industry is still in a very selective recovery, right? Big ticket categories remain much more vulnerable to, cautious timing effect, policy transition than smaller, emotionally rewarding purchases, right? So this is one of the biggest reasons why there's a big decline. But again, with the recent news about what you're seeing with the war and with oil prices going up, I think there is going to be a substantial reversal here, especially with a lot of different promotions that's being offered by EVs, including totally free charging for say 30,000 kilometers or etc. Those marketing gimmicks are going to play a big role in hopefully reversing this trend because the EVs are going to make a big comeback. The oil prices is going to most likely hold being quite high for the foreseeable future. So there will be a big, that is at least our view, that it will be a big reversal of automobile sales.
Right, John, I understand you've been supporting, loosening license plate restrictions in big cities like Beijing. Would that be a solution to this concern, automobile sales declining?
Yeah, well, I have a very strong opinion about this issue.
Right.
I think, I'm not against restricting the use of automobiles in major cities because of the traffic jam, but I'm totally against the idea of essentially banning people to buy cars. I think these are two different things. There's a way of still allowing people to buy automobiles, but at the same time restrict their use because of the traffic jams. So I think the idea of the most expensive steel plate in the world in Shanghai, for automobile license plate is a bad idea. And I think here in Beijing, the lottery system is even worse in a sense. I think just by lifting these things will unlock a huge demand. I want to buy a car. I can't buy a car. That's the problem.
Yeah. But on the other hand, it also means decision makers still got some leeway or room if they want to further boost consumption, right?
Well, I mean, right now they are using the rebates and incentives, but as soon as these things are gone, I mean, I think it's becoming a pattern now. As soon as you see, or as soon as the expectation of these things to be gone, the automobile sales start to drop. So, I think rebates and incentives can't last forever. There are still untapped demand in China, especially I think in major cities. I think a lot of government officials tend to equate car ownership with traffic jams. It's not true, actually. I mean, there are ways to get around that. Nevertheless, it's unfortunate that still a lot of cars are not being bought because of these reasons.
Yes, this is a good topic for another session. But now we turn to another highlight of this consumption rebound in the first 2 months, which is the rise of China's emotional economy. Actually, I think the latest purchases of three of us are more or less associated with this emotional economy, right? So, probably, John, how is it different from traditional models?
Yeah, well, emotional economy, it's kind of emotional to talk about it.
Satisfaction,
It's a,
like your
it's,
condo
well, I mean, well,
redecoration.
let me explain what I mean by that.
All right.
I mean, there are a couple of things in that category. Things like people, buy those brand items that are extremely expensive and, for emotional attachment, like Labubu kind of a thing.
Mm,
I call, this is essentially one category. And the other category that I see related to this concept of emotional economy that has been seeing a tremendous growth is the pet economy. More and more young people are raising companion dogs and cats.
indeed.
That's what I mean. It's emotional to talk about these things because I think as Chinese people's living standards getting higher and higher, and they get some extra money, people are starting to realize what a bargain. What a great, wonderful life to have a companion dog, for example. This is man's best friend, right? You give the dog some foods. In return, they give the entire life to you. It's the greatest bargain, you can get out in the consumer world. So more and more people are going out and raise dogs. I know it's been growing, like crazy. So that's a good thing. I think you look at the per capita dog ownership here in China compared to, for example, United States and Europe, still very low. A lot of room to grow, and I think it's a good thing. People are getting happier, getting more satisfied with their life, and it's a wonderful thing to see people doing that.
Then what's driving consumers to prioritize emotional value and personal experience, over purely functional purchases then?
I think it's why people do that. Well, I think these days there's more stress in life, and it's just a quality of life issue, I guess. Your
All
life
right.
quality is indeed getting much better with a four-leg friend in your house. It's something you don't realize until you have it, you experience it. It's experience good in a sense,
All
right?
right.
So I would encourage you to go out and get one if you can, and if you have the resources. My problem is that I travel too much, so it's going to be a problem.
But
But once I don't travel too much, I will go out and get one.
okay, we got a perfect candidate here. Jiahe. Jiahe is a big fan of cats, cat lover. So, can you tell us
Well,
more about it?
basically, I love all kinds of animals.
Okay.
It's not only cats, but I had a pet cat a few years ago, and because that was a stray cat who worked in right into the garden of my parents, and we just adopted her. So it wasn't a very intentional raising, and that cat lived for 18 years under our caring. I would say we
Right.
did quite a lot to care its health. So I remember this kind of, I just love all the pets, turtles, goose. I had a goose before, dogs, all these kind of things. And when you love animals, you really make a lot of purchasing. I mean, like my cat, well, that previous cat, I still remember that because it kept on carrying things like mice and squirrels around my parents' garden. So we had to give it a pill every 3 months in order to protect it from any potential hazard. And that pill cost me about 40 yuan per pill. So that's really expensive because when I got sick myself, for example, such as catching a cold or got some problem with my throat, my medicine is about 10 to 20 yuan. And the cat costs 40 for every pill that it takes. So it's really kind of expensive. And the reason I picked that pill because it's really good quality and it's good for the health of an old cat. At the age of almost 20, you really want to care your pet. So I make this example saying that people really spend quite a lot for their pets, especially when they really take the pet as a part of the family rather than just a cat or a dog. And you spend quite a lot of money on that. And because one of the very important reasons that encourages the growth of the pet economy is because when you are making a purchasing, you don't really know whether this is good or not. For example, when you're buying some food for yourself, you know the taste of the food, you know how you feel after you have taken, for example, the dish from a certain restaurant, and you can just feel that, and you can make judgment yourself, and you will say, okay, I paid this money, it is worthwhile, or maybe it is not worthwhile. You can make the judgment yourself. But when you're feeding your pet, you can't. You don't know how your pet is feeling when it, for example, when my cat is taking the can that I bought for it, you just don't know. The pet won't communicate with you. It looks happy all the time, whatever the food I give it to the cat, or especially the dog. The dog is always happy, whatever you give it to it. So if you want to care for your pets, the only thing that you can do is spend more money. Okay, so you look at the product, it says quite fancy, saying that we're offering very good quality and our price is expensive. You love your pet, you spend your money. So that's why quite many companies in the pet economy and the pet industry are making very good profits, because people just like to express a love with spending more money. So this is happening in China right now. I mean, if you look at the listed companies in China's pet industry and pet economy, you see that profits, their return on equity are soaring. Some companies are making like 15, 20% return on equity, and their income growing at 10 to 20% every single year. They're really good companies. The only problem is that everyone knows that they're good companies, so they are yearly trading at pretty high valuation, but they're really good companies.
Then more broadly, what's driving the rise of the emotional economy, not just limited to pets, like other niche hobbies or collectibles or other things?
Well, that's basically because China's economy is growing and it is passing the threshold of 10,000 USD in the past few years. Because if you look at economic growth, when an economy is developing below the threshold of 10,000 USD per capita, then many of the consumption that people make to the critical consumption, for example, paying the rent for the house, paying the bill for the gas, or paying for food, paying for traveling, this kind of very basic consumption. These consumption are that if you don't make them, you just can't make it. But when the economy is passing the threshold of 10,000 USD, more and more this kind of compulsory consumption has been fulfilled. I mean, not all of them, but a large degree of them has been fulfilled. And more people are having the money and they're saying, okay, I've had enough to eat. I have had enough money to pay for my air conditioner, pay for my electricity. That's not a problem. And where should I be spending now? So they turn to this kind of emotional consumption, or so-called please yourself consumption, these kinds of things.
Okay. Then, Subu, do you have a different interpretation of this? Is it like some say it's because of economic uncertainty or generational shifts? What's your take?
Yeah. I think I would say it signals to both, but it is more of a structural transformation rather than just a weakness in traditional demand. Right. So it's not just a temporary response to a soft economy. I think it reflects a genuine change in how Chinese consumers have started to define value. All right. But at the same time, I think the recent acceleration in emotional and experience-led spending is clearly happening alongside continuous caution on big ticket items. Right. So we've identified this emotional economy almost 2 years back when we started putting out some of our reports where we said that, especially when it comes to travel and spending, they are more tied to meaning, gifting, and memories. And together pair that with the two other economies that we talk about, value economy and confidence economy, it's important because in China today, the emotion, the trust, and values are interacting but not replacing one another. Right? So you have the trust and values that also come forefront together with the emotional need for being satisfied with whatever you want to purchase with. So Chinese consumers still have demand, but they increasingly need confidence, the clarity, and the emotional justification before they convert and buy something. So this means that this is both a structural shift in behavior and also a market where I would say traditional demand remains more fragile than before.
This has been the Chat Lounge. As the rise of the emotional economy comes into focus, what should policymakers, investors, and businesses do to adapt to the new trends? That's coming up right after the break.
Sideline Story brings you all things sports related. The hottest topics, latest events, juiciest stories, all with a very personal take. Subscribe to Sideline Story Podcast for heated sports discussions covering events that are happening in China and around the world.
Welcome back to the Chat Lounge. We continue our discussion on the new trends in China's consumption rebound. Turning to policy and investment implications of that kind of shift, China has rolled out a range of pro-consumption policies, including subsidies and trading programs. Then, John, how effective do you think those measures have been so far?
Well, definitely they're effective. Every time a program is introduced, it boosts sales. There's no doubt about that. I think the issue is that once this program is phasing out, then whether the boosted effect is going to be sustainable, that's a difficult question to answer. And we know that these subsidies and trading programs, the money is coming from essentially the taxes associated with the sales. And so the government essentially getting less money from the sales. Whether it wants to do this perpetually, I hope it does actually.
Right.
But there's also a tax implication for this. So in any case, obviously with subsidies, with these trading programs, the price is being reduced and demand is increased because the demand curve is always downward sloping for most products. So, in a nutshell, I think such measures have been quite successful. But again, the issue is whether, what's going to happen when these programs are phased out.
Then how do you think policy should evolve to better support this kind of shift?
It's a tough question. I think the answer really lies with the income side, I would say.
Okay.
I think people tend to have a willingness to buy things. They go out to buy things. If they have money, I guess. So in order to beef up consumption, I think at a very fundamental level, people's income level have to be raised. You look at the wage income in China as a composition of GDP, it's quite low compared to many industrialized countries. So what it means is that the consumers are getting a smaller share of the total pie compared to their Western counterparts. I think we need to gear our economy towards a model where the return on labor should at least keep pace with the return on capital. In other words, we need to put more money into the pockets of the workers, of the laborers, of the people who are actually doing the work. And in that way, I think consumption can be beefed up.
Yeah, that's the ultimate answer. Subu, your suggestions here?
Yeah, I think in terms of the policies, I think that they need to move gradually from mainly simulating goods purchases to probably more supporting service and experience and build out the household confidence. Right? So this means probably more support for tourism, culture, entertainment, wellness, etc. But also support for confidence side of consumption in terms of better jobs, social security, healthcare, education. This is already happening in most sectors in China. So
Indeed.
We do not see that waning anymore. But I think building a much more stronger confidence on all these sides will add much more confidence in the purchases of in economic purchases. I would also add that the policy should also recognize how consumer journey now actually works. Right. So with the digital age, discovery is more social first, right? So decision making is very fragmented. Conversions often happen depending on reducing friction and increasing reassurance, building that trust. So in that sense, confidence from policymakers almost as much as consumption policy.
I think very clear message there. Then to Jiahe, what do these emerging trends mean for investors, and how should investors and businesses adapt?
Well, when we look at the rising of China's consumption, it's one of the main trends that investors are actually following. Quite a lot of capital are trying to seek for the next rising of the consumption. For example, as we have been discussing about the pet economy. I know quite many friends in the PE industry, the private equity industry, and investment industry. They keep on looking for new businesses and new models, and there has been quite a lot of money made. So regarding these investments, is that sometimes people are just paying too much money for the new thing. So this is one of the problems. But altogether, these funds are actually supporting the growth of China's consumption market with their investment into all these fields, with their testing into these fields. You have an idea and you throw some money, you throw millions, tens of millions, or hundreds of millions, saying that we're going to make a new kind of investment. We're going to create a new kind of business model. Are we going to make money? Some are going to make a lot of money, some are not. But altogether, these investments pushes forward China's overall consumption economy, and it is benefiting the whole of the China's economy. And if you take all these funds together, they are making quite a lot of profit. So it's an average return that is definitely positive. That's why so many people are actually rushing into the growing of China's consumption market.
Right. What about John?
I guess investors are usually chase where the money is. I guess there are these. We spend quite a bit of time talking about these new developments, these new trends in consumption. So like the emotional economy, the new frontiers of consumption. Like for the wealthy, I guess. Like the low altitude economy, yachts. JD.com's boss is investing money in making yachts, right? So these are the new frontiers. I think in general, as China's middle class expands, as income level rises, as more and more people, folks break into the billionaire category, there will be demand for a lot of new things. What about outer space travel, for example, right? I mean, this can only be affordable to the billionaires, I guess. Well, I mean, we're gonna have more and more billionaires, so that could be a new consumption frontier, right? So I think investors are definitely keeping a close eye on these things. They chase where the opportunities are, where the money is.
Yeah, maybe
So
there may be risks they should be aware of.
yeah, of course. I mean, when they invest, they certainly look at the risks. I guess they don't need us for
If,
lectures on
yeah, if
taking
you're
picture.
asked to give them some tips, what kind of risks they should be mindful of.
Some of the things are quite risky. I mean, there are plenty of precedents and examples of how investment in these cutting edge consumption technologies are getting burned out. I think we should look at a history, look at the successful cases in the past and also unsuccessful cases in the past, and learn from that. And also think about the unique situations in China. These are usually the things that investors would be very carefully looking at.
I think John's mind has already taken off because he's got something else to catch. All right, I'll let you go. John, thanks a lot.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I'll talk to you next time then.
Sure.
Thanks. Yeah.
Then to Subu, how do you think investors and business should adapt, and if there are any risks they should be mindful of, what are they?
Yeah, so I think my main takeaway is that China consumption is no longer just one broad story, right? It's not uniform, so it's very selective. It's category by category market, and so investors have to be cognizant of that and need to understand that it is not uniform. You can't just throw money against everything and then expect it to have some great returns. Right. So winners are likely to be brands or platforms that, that combine what we talked about, all these things before, things like emotional resonance, cultural relevance is something that's also very important. Being able to have that social discoverability and being able to be efficient in those conversions. So this will generate a lot more conversions and sales and profits than just general attention. And the businesses also will need to reduce friction. Right. Some of the key things that I would say from a risk point is that investors should not overestimate the breadth of the rebound. Right, like I claim, it is going to be category by category. So you have to look at very individual ones to understand where the growth is going to be. Also, you can't just mistake social buzz for durable demand. Right, as we saw in the latest news, pop marts sales have been a bit more disappointing than expected. Right, so while it's still growing, the growth is not as much. So investors are pulling back some money. But again, just the social buzz will not sustain your business. So you need to have that figure out as what is the durable demand. And confusing, emotional economy momentum with just immunity to macroeconomics and macro weaknesses. So the entire world economy is very fragile, which also brings to this very good point, which I was reading quite recently, is that more investors are now willing to pile money into China because they see that as the most stable of the leading economies compared to others, where fluctuation in oil and gold is swinging by so much, even the stock market. So investors are going to be more cautious and they're going to look for places where stability is much, much higher than just outsized returns that they would look for.
Indeed. And last but not least, Jiahe, as an investment expert, do you have anything to remind those who want to invest here in this area?
Well, I wouldn't say I'm an expert. I'm just been investing for quite a long period of time and still surviving in this market. Capital market is where there is the most difficult place. I mean, it's good business on one hand, and it is sometimes making profit is something on the other hand. So it's I would say in the world of investment, it's not that difficult for you to understand which industry is good and which industry is not good. And it's not very difficult for you to find out which company is good and which company is just living a normal life. But the difficult thing is finding out the balance between the price and the quality of companies. So this is the most important part. I mean, if you have a very good industry, you have a very good company. For example, the pet industry. If you look at the leading Chinese companies in the pet economy in China, they're very good companies. They're making tremendous amount of growth. They're making up their brand, challenging the global pet food brand who are operating in China. They're making higher and higher profit. Their return on their asset is marvelous, 15, 20%, sometimes even more than 20%. But everyone knows this. So this is a problem. If everyone knows it's a good company, people are making a very high offering for the stock price, and if you jump in, you're not promised to make a good profit. But on the other hand, some companies, when you look at some other companies, they're not very good. They're still, I would say that some of them are even surviving with their competition against their strong opponents. But they are not dying, and the market don't like them, give them a very low price. They can be very good investment targets. So it's a hard job. It's always a hard job.
All right. And with that, we conclude this session. Many thanks to Chen Jiahe, Chief Investment Officer, Novem Arcae Technologies, Subramania, Bhatt, founder and CEO of Singapore-based marketing technology company, China Trading Desk, and John Gong, Professor of Economics, University of International Business and Economics, for your time and insights. Drop us a line anytime at radio@cgtn.com. Tell us what you think. I'm Tuyun. Until next time, take care.
best military commander is not he who fights 100 battles and wins every one of them. The best military strategy does not lead to the desiccation of the enemy's capital city. Decoding the Art of War will help you understand why there's no art in war and how Sun Tzu stayed undefeatable using the science of war, with fun stories and insightful breakdown of famous battles. Find Decoding the Art of War wherever you listen.